Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Biz Systems Magic 2020 online. No one can deny that the world we live in today looks very different from just a few months ago. In fact, our inaugural Biz Systems Magic was just a year ago in San Francisco with systems leaders from around the US flying in. But humans are nothing if not resilient, and we saw systems and ops leaders step up to create business continuity, manage their teams with compassion, and help their entire company adapt to our new reality. In our sessions today, members of the systematic community will share their journey responding to a worldwide pandemic. But it is still our goal that you will leave with actionable takeaways, inspiration, and new connections with your peers. So it is in that spirit that we open up Biz Systems Magic with an incredible panel of some of today's most innovative CIOs. First, we have Stephen Franchetti, CIO of Slack. He leads Slack's IT organization, which includes business applications and all core IT services. Previously, he oversaw enterprise applications at Workday, among others. Sylvie Veilleux is the current and first CIO of Dropbox. She has led Dropbox pre- and post-IPO to enable the growth and scale of the company. Prior, she spent time at Salesforce and Mozilla, and many others across the US, Canada, and France. And moderating today's discussion is Mark Settle, a 7-time CIO and author. He's led IT departments at organizations like Okta, IHS, Arrow Electronics, among others. Settle recently published the book, Truth from the Valley, a practical primer on IT management for the next decade. And without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much. This is a real treat for me to spend an hour with two good friends and two recognized IT leaders. And I want to welcome everybody listening to really the whole day. You really don't have too many of these kind of opportunities to talk shop and learn from so many diverse and experienced people that operate throughout our industry. So I just encourage everybody. I know everybody's busy, but this is a fairly unique opportunity, and I've had a chance to look at the agenda for the rest of the day, and I plan to camp out and tune into some of the other conversations that will take place. So with no further ado, I'm going to let Sylvie and Stephen introduce themselves a little bit more, and specifically talk a little bit about their roles and responsibilities. I mean, CIO jobs vary a little bit from one company to another. And although I'm sure the entire audience is familiar with Dropbox and Slack, maybe you could provide a little insight into the scope and scale of the company's operations. And so, Sylvie, why don't we get started with you?
Thank you, Mark. So, hi, everybody. Dropbox. I've been at Dropbox for about 3 years and some months now. And as we mentioned earlier, joined pre-IPO and post. And this has been a tremendous journey for us to grow and scale Dropbox. I've created, the first centralized IT organization there, and it was quite some magic. Our product is pretty well known, as many of you know. We are with 14 million paying users, 400,000 business teams using us to collaborate. And we also have a lot of personal use, and we've introduced a lot of new capabilities to help people in their personal lives, most recently Password Manager. The IT team that I have is supporting approximately 2,000 to 3,000 employees at Dropbox globally, and I'm responsible for everything you can imagine that's not product. So anything from business applications to corporate infrastructure, business intelligence and data, the whole gamut. So it's been a pretty exciting ride, and I'll pass it back on to you, Mark.
Stephen, how about Slack?
Yeah, and so it's great to be here. It's great to be at another Magic conference. I love that name, by the way. And so Steve Franchetti, I've been at Slack for 2.5 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. And as the introduction stated, I came in from Workday. Spent about 4 years at Workday. Much like Sylvie, formed the first IT organization at Slack. It was very distributed before I came on board, and we managed to pull all of that together and grow the organization over the course of time. Went through the fun experience, again, like Sylvie. I feel like I'm repeating Sylvie's story. We went public, which was a lot of fun, and for anyone who's not done it, I highly recommend it. I have the scars to prove it as well. Lots of good stories associated with that. And if you think about my responsibility at Slack, it's all everything you would expect, soup to nuts when you think about IT responsibilities. So it's everything from the sort of fundamentals and how we touch employees on a day-to-day basis with laptops and AV and IT support and all of that implies, all the way through data and analytics and our business systems, and really impacting the business. We actually also do a lot, I'm sure Sylvie does as well, around Slack on Slack. So I actually spend a lot of time with customers really talking about how we use our own product to enable our business, and really kind of be in that showcase, drinking our own champagne, as they say. So that's it for me.
Okay. So the COVID crisis is an inescapable topic, for better or worse. There's no way that we could sidestep that in this conversation. And as I'm sure most of the folks that have joined us this morning have heard all the stories about IT organizations stepping up to the challenge and provisioning hardware to home offices and beefing up VPNs and deploying new collaboration tools, et cetera. I think that story's been told, with all due respect to the fact that you two represent some of those collaboration tools that were deployed. And I thought a more interesting angle would be to talk about the way the customers change, either in the way that they use their products, maybe your products, maybe there were some new and innovative ways in which they elected to use the products that you've sold in the past, or maybe that led to some new support issues as well that you haven't faced. So from a customer perspective, how did that impact operations? So Stephen, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, and you ever think about customer impact and kind of change in behavior from our customer standpoint? I mean, the biggest impact I think we saw early on was that there was a massive uptick in usage. And literally within a few days, we went from something like 10 million users to about 12.5 million users. So literally unprecedented growth. In fact, we blew through our growth numbers for a number of users for the year within a few days, which was really staggering. So you can imagine the kind of tension that put on our customer-facing teams, our support teams. But from a customer standpoint, really partly what they were looking to do, and this kind of clambering to Slack and Dropbox and some of these other kind of collaboration type tools, is replace that sense of connectedness that you lose clearly when employees are all in separate locations. So, if you think about Slack, many of them have social channels they've created around water cooler type conversations. So we had like parenting support channels and overall COVID advice channels, really trying to connect with and support their employees ultimately. The other thing I would say is that we found that the concept of mission critical really started to take on a whole new meaning during the pandemic. So we already had customers who were using Slack as a key component of their business operations. But what we found is that during that period, we had many customer stories of using Slack literally in life and death situations. So I'll give you an example. We had like the RPI ambulance service, which is one of our customers out of Manhattan in New York. And you think about what they do, a matter of seconds literally is the difference between life and death and how they dispatch their ambulance service. And now they're using Slack much more to get a kind of instantaneous way of communicating and really allowing them to respond much faster and giving them that kind of critical extra time to get to the patient sooner. So when you start to hear stories like that, it really starts to give you a different perspective of how people are using the technology and what kind of difference it's making during this time as well. One other thing I would say, and actually Sylvie was involved in this, we created a channel, a shared channel using Slack Connect during this time with our customers. And Slack Connect allows you to bring multiple organizations together, whether it's partners or customers or vendors or what have you, into one Slack channel and get the same kind of functionality. You can chat with them, you can collaborate with them. We actually created a shared channel with CIOs from across the valley, really when the COVID situation was unfolding. And it was actually fascinating to see CIOs collaborating in real time on topics like office closures and how to support employees moving to remote work. And then even more recently, what are the plans to actually open offices around the world? So it was this much more fluid way of communicating as things were unfolding with the pandemic. And we're really able to compare notes in real time and how others were handling the crisis. So kind of lots of sort of changes there. But that concept of mission critical really started to take on a whole new meaning was the big one for us.
Just out of curiosity, did you beef up the customer support desk? Were there a bigger influx of calls or problems that needed to be resolved?
There was, and specifically, Mark, so it's a great point on onboarding new customers. You can imagine you get 2.5 million customers within the space of a week. It's almost like all hands on deck, and it was actually amazing to see. We sourced not only from the regular kind of customer support pool, but we actually sourced from across the organization. We had salespeople being pulled in, we had IT people being pulled in to help customers onboard with Slack. So it was kind of a real team effort to get through that kind of spike period.
Did they get desperate enough to get you down on the desk to help with it?
Well, you know, I threatened to get down there, but no one took me up on that. I don't know what happened.
Okay, Sylvie, so let's flip back to Dropbox and talk a little bit about how the customers reacted through the crisis in your case.
Well, I mean, Stephen and I are fortunate that we both work for a company where the product is about facilitating work, and especially remote and distributed work. So we have similar experiences. But, you know, similar to Slack, we've seen like record trial starts like at the beginning of the COVID period, and 60% increase in weekly active users on our new desktop app. We saw a 3x signature request with our HelloSign e-signature platform. And it was amazing to see from an IT like perspective and getting ready, or not even getting ready, but anticipating the needs that COVID would drive. We reacted really quickly, and we enabled things to support our customers, like enablement of extending or adjusting our net payment terms, or even invoice frequency, or instant provisioning of licenses on the spot. And an example of that, we had a hospital in Boston that needed 100 additional seats to manage bed inventory. And because we had planned and anticipated some of the customer needs, we were able to make that happen on the spot. So that was super appreciative of them. There's other customer stories that are really interesting too, is like the University of Michigan and the University of Oregon. They deployed Dropbox in their campus wide as their tools to enable remote learning. And this was like creative in many ways. We embedded Zoom and Canvas. They were already tools they were using. So we made that seamless experience. And I would say the other example is like in our e-signature, we accelerated like the localization of the different countries, and we added 21 different additional languages. And we also launched recently the HelloSign embedded feature into Dropbox. And you know, very close to COVID, you're seeing lenders that are using our HelloSign solution to do PP loans, which impact, you know, how other people in their lives and their work environment are being successful or not. So it was a huge amount of benefits that we were able to see through our products. And to Stephen's point, it's very humbling, right?
So with that, I mean, that growth in user base and different use cases, were there any new IT initiatives or maybe initiatives in progress that you sped up, Sylvie?
Yeah, well, we're a cloud native company, so we've adopted, you know, a large amount of best of breed SaaS. So we had systems and infrastructure set up for remote work and distributed teams, so that transition was seamless. And our annual planning strategies are very aligned to our business. So for the most part, we stayed course with them, and everything we do is very much tied to a business objective and initiative. So it was pretty cool. But however, you know, to be able to do this very well, we've created like a taxonomy and a foundation that everything is based on. So if there is a change in a business priority or need, it's easy for us to flip the switch and use an agile mindset. We use Jira as an example, as a core foundation for that. But we did pause a few things, right? So it's not like everything stayed course. Like, we're not in the offices, so we held off on additional expansions and refreshes and network upgrades and that kind of thing. And we pivoted to accelerating internal efficiencies and creating new experiences. You know, when we are like an office-based company, a lot of the experiences are based on face-to-face interactions, and now they're not. So what we're doing is we're automating a lot more of those, like by design, face-to-face interactions to not needing to be face-to-face. And we're moving those human experiences to the most critical areas like brainstorming, difficult problem solving, decision-making. And we're reevaluating a lot of our business processes so we can build higher value engagement as part of our managing SaaS at scale initiative.
Is there a small team that's specifically looking at those processes, or every team has been given tools or license to go do it on their own?
Yeah, there's definitely some core, aspect of the team that is focused on this, and then others are naturally doing that as part of their work. But we're going to be implementing new tools to understand the engagement we have across our SaaS to see how we can optimize those experiences.
So Stephen, at Slack, did you tap the brakes on some initiatives that were in flight, or start up any new ones based on?
Yeah, it's a good question, and kind of actually much like Sylvie, we I think the big shift clearly was the shift to remote work, and we saw like a move to virtual events, just like every other company, and like our user conference, much like we're doing today, is all gone virtual. So clearly there's a big shift to that, and then what do we need to do to support employees, and the amount of times my team is now troubleshooting home network problems is a new thing, I would say. Yep. So there's certainly kind of a beefing up of sort of general support around that. And then from a customer perspective, we kind of touched on this before, because of the uptick in demand for the service, really any initiatives that would support our customer experience team, essentially our customer support organization and our customer success teams, who are the ones that are making sure that the service is being adopted and is ultimately being as successful as possible. There was a number of those things that really came to the fore, and we looked to accelerate systems and tools that they could use in their toolkit. In terms of what sidelined, essentially, and again, Sylvie talked about this, anything that was related to an office, we put on pause. We do think at some point in time we will get back to some semblance of an office. It may take on a different form, and it may be a while. But certainly we're pausing that for now until we kind of figure out what's happening in the world. But interestingly enough, not much impact to our plans for the year other than that. And we're still really looking to deliver the things that we said we would. And actually, I was the one who was most surprised about that, I have to say. Had you told me at the beginning of the year that we would have a global pandemic and we'd move our entire workforce to working remotely, and there'd be very little disruption to our roadmap as a result, it would have been pretty hard to believe. And don't get me wrong, it's been an incredible impact on the people that we have in our organization, and the burden of schooling kids from home and looking after family members and all that implies. But I would say the flip side is that I would say as a company, we've been as productive as we've ever been. And it's really a testament to the team that's working on, the roadmaps and the initiatives to keep them on track. So I'd say there's been some changes to kind of flex to support those customer-facing teams, but outside of that, we're pretty much staying on course.
So I want to pick up on major initiatives. As we all know, and most of the people who are listening in, major IT initiatives are a contact sport. You've got typically your IT specialists, you've got business executives, you've got subject matter experts that are necessary, and you typically have maybe professional services groups or consultants that are involved in, those kind of major initiatives, big dollar numbers associated with them, very visible targets and delivery dates. When I look back on some of the ones I've been involved in, there's so much casual social conversation and information exchange. You've got to, as the top person, it's the doctrine of no surprises. Like, nobody can be surprised that, we're not hitting our dates, or we're going to spend more money, or some subject matter expert didn't step up to do what they were supposed to by such and such a date. So Stephen, to continue the conversation, I'll give Sylvia a chance here too. What's that been like? So you said like our initiatives kept rolling right along, but I still, without that kind of social, casual, informal connection, how have you been able to keep everybody in the loop and satisfied?
Yeah, and it's definitely was a challenge to begin with, and certainly a transition. But like lots of other people, lots of Zoom fatigue, Mark. There's no question about that, especially at the beginning, until we kind of got used to working in this way. But in addition to that, though, we certainly had a bunch of major initiatives underway, and we're reinventing our quote to cash processes. We're re-architecting our entire data stack from a technology standpoint, to just name a couple. And I think again, we're all kind of adapting to, and I think we've gotten more into the mold now of this remote first way of working. In other words, how do we adapt our norms and our processes to kind of optimize for working from home? And that's been the big shift. But For us, no big surprise. We're in a culture that we do as much as we possibly can inside of Slack. So we have channels for literally everything that you can think of inside of Slack for organizations. So we have a channel for IT and business technology. We have social channels. The cat channel is one of the most popular channels we have inside of Slack. It's amazing the passion that people have for their cats, but there you go. But we also have channels for every project going on in the company, and all the people working on those projects are collaborating in those channels. So we tend not to do a lot of status type meetings where people spend a bunch of time preparing PowerPoints and then walking other people through project status and meetings. All of that is really done in channel inside of Slack. So our stakeholders and execs are really used to using those project channels to get the latest and greatest on what's going on for those major initiatives. So that really hasn't changed too much. What has changed, and I think you touched on this, Mark, is the casual exchange of information that you get when you run into people in the hallway and you're able to chat through the issue of the moment and what's going on with the specific initiatives kind of off the cuff. And clearly that's harder to replace, but that again is where we're really relying on Slack more than ever before, if that's possible, to replace those more casual exchanges of information, whether it's in a DM to the stakeholders or whether it's through those project channels.
How many messages do you get every day, Steve?
Oh my God! I was looking at it the other day. My daughter is doing an internship right now. She's at the University of Portland, and she started using Slack, and she's getting channel overload. And then she compared her instance of Slack to my instance of Slack, and we have literally, I must have about 1,500 channels on the go at any given time. So you can imagine how that equates into messages. I can't even imagine.
Okay, I appreciate that candor. So Sylvie, same question back to you in terms of big initiatives and maybe new ways of managing those things under the current conditions.
Yeah, I feel like Steve and I should be twins sometimes. Similarities, and definitely not from the same origins. Like I'm Canadian, and Steve, you're somewhere across the pond, right?
I'm Scottish.
I didn't want to go the wrong way there.
Yeah, that's right. It's all sensible.
But I think we have several initiatives, large ones, and we haven't changed a lot of how we engage and communicate with our stakeholders and teams because we use our own products, definitely to be able to execute and communicate. But I think the key piece I find is there's two things. One is we've created a significant amount of transparency on everything we're working on. And at any point in time, somebody can go to this portal and dashboard and see all the projects, how they're lined up to the strategic initiatives, get status reports on it. If it's red, yellow, green, if there's anything yellow or red, what's the go to green plan? We have created that very transparent view. And then for very significantly business impacting initiatives, we have steercos we've established or operating councils. And what I feel the working from home has brought, instead of being in a conference room and some people on video and some people in the room or a lot of people in the room, you're all at the same level of playing, on video. And I think it's opened up for people to engage more and be visible more. So I think people are speaking up and there's better communication, better collaboration as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen, actually I saw an article about sports teams. And they have a full team meeting on Zoom with everybody present. And the comment was made that in the old days, if it had been done physically, there were typically a handful of outspoken people and everybody else deferred to that handful of people. Yeah. And the majority of the people in the room were pretty much silent, just observers. That's completely changed. People have come out of the woodwork on these calls who were sort of typecast as introverts who actually have a lot of interesting observations to share.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And the other thing I was going to suggest too is the COVID situation has created a lot more empathy for people about even feeling more human. There's a lot more, you notice somebody hasn't spoken up or what I just cut off Stephen, right? So there's norms you can establish so that those things don't prevent people from having their voice at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing, I think, is going back to the whole sports analogy and everyone being on Zoom is right now it's a level playing field. And it used to be the scenario where inevitably everyone was in the office and maybe there was one or two people on Zoom who were drowned out, and it was very difficult for them to get their voice heard. Now everyone's in the same playing field. So the interesting aspect of this, I think, is going to be when we go back to an office in whatever form that takes. How do we adapt to more of the hybrid style of working, where no longer it's a level playing field? We don't have everyone in the office. We don't have everyone remote. There's going to be people in the office collaborating. There's going to be people, dotted around various different locations. So that I think is going to be the interesting next phase if we get there sometime next year, is how do we adapt our processes in terms of collaboration, communication to that hybrid environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've both learned a lot about your organizations the last 5 months, maybe things that you never knew before, or maybe things you kind of knew about in the back of your mind, but they were shown and they were thrown into sharp contrast or highlighted by what's happened in the last 5 months. Let's go play a thought experiment with the two of you. So let's say the board meets, both your boards, they meet, and they come to the conclusion that, this crisis, this could go on for a long time. The vaccination solution, could happen, could not happen. And everybody knows that IT has played a key role in enabling businesses to continue their operation. So, boards can do some interesting things from time to time. So maybe they all look at each other and say, we need to make some additional investments in IT. Like, we're not smart enough to know what those are, but we know that a strong IT organization is critical to weathering the crisis, no matter how long it lasts. So whether he or she likes it or not, your CFOs come into your office, they sit down and they look at you and say, you know what? I've got some extra money for IT. It has never happened, like in our collective lives. The CFO sits there and says, the board's making me do this, and I've just found a couple $1 million for you. So here's the question. When you build an organization, you can do it with people, process, or technology. So you could look and say, I'm short on some skills, or I need to go get people, or we have some pretty inefficient processes, and I know we need to be closer to best of breed in the way we do X, Y, or Z. So I've got to bring some consultants in here to, give us some coaching and direction. Or it could be, man, I've just been waiting to get the money to go buy 2 new tools that are going to allow me to do, whatever. So Sylvie, you can get us started with this thought experiment. If the tooth fairy showed up, and left a couple $1 million under your pillow, how would you spend that money?
Oh my God, there's so many things I would want to do with that. If I had 3 things, maybe one, I would get everything I have on my plate done faster so I can move on to the next thing. That would be one thing. But if I have to think more concretely here, I would probably build a tool that creates that single pane of glass for all of my SaaS solutions. I've talked about managing SaaS at scale, and for IT organizations needing to manage a large amount of SaaS, there's no single tool that does security and privacy and management of licenses and costs and engagement. I would like to build one thing, one place, and make it the center of my universe, so people we can have people do other things. Because I truly believe in the best of breed. And then the second piece I would probably do is I would hire and train more IT professionals to be employee experience experts, right? Focused on value and realization of their investments, and really being closer to the business in terms of how people work and building great experiences for them. So it's merge the designer and the engineer and create this new breed of IT professional.
Okay. Stephen?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting myself up
okay.
there. So one of those mystical, rare occasions that just never happens when the CFO comes into the office with a big bag of money. But I love that, Mark. I love that scenario. I dream about that on occasion. But and again, kind of much like Sylvie, based on the business that we're in, of course, the business of IT, we're always under pressure to do things faster and do more things. And inevitably, I had $1 for every time someone said, "Can you just do that faster?" Maybe I'd be doing something else right now. But the 2 specific things I would say, and it boils down to people. My focus would be investing in people to forward a couple of key initiatives that we already have in flight and just get them done faster and like half the time. One is a huge one for us. It's data and analytics. And we've kind of been on this journey probably for the last year, and we're kind of reinventing our entire tech stack in that regard when it comes to our, data and analytics. So you think about Slack, we log everything that goes on in the product, every chat, every API call, every interaction with the platform. So we have this massive mountain of big data, but it's a pretty manual process for actually getting insights from that. And really what we'd love to do is kind of automate that more readily and really drive, get insights around things like how people are using the product, around the world, and how it's performing, and new business opportunities as well. We can get them today. It's just not as kind of effective or as quickly as we'd like. The second really is around automation. And today at the Magic conference, we're going to be talking a lot about automation. We've done a lot in this space, really with a combination of Slack and also Workado, really to improve our processes inside the company using the Slack platform. So whether it's automating, we do about 40% of our IT support using an intelligent chatbot inside of Slack, or streamlining approvals from all of our different business systems into one single approvals bot. And we even have a legal bot called Ruth Bader Ginsbot, which is my all-time favorite, that helps us with our legal processes. So we've done a lot, but there's so much more that we could do in terms of automation, especially at this time. And we talked about this before, how do we actually free up our people within the organization such that they can really focus on the higher order work that's going to have most impact, not only within IT, but also in the business in general. And I think the key to that is really around automation. So those are really the two areas I'd spend the cash. And again, it's investing in the people who could help accelerate those things.
One of the concepts I tried to introduce in my first book was the idea of talent debt. And my observation is that as IT professionals, we're very conversant with managing tech debt in our systems and on hardware as well. And we have no difficulties coming up with multi-year programs to, try to address that problem. And almost subconsciously, every IT leader is aware of, either gaps in bandwidth or capability, skills that are needed in the future. But the way we approach it is so kind of, helter-skelter, like you kind of wait for a big project to come along. So you have the license to go get some kind of a skill, or you buy a new product. And a lot of times there's no kind of master plan, even the framework of a master plan in place, but it's so critical to the success of the organization in the future. And to be able to position the organization to have a strategic impact long-term instead of just, like kind of running to fetch a bone every time the business comes up with some new thing that they want us to go off and do. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
Mark, just to jump in on that, I've just read the first chapter of that book as well. I just finished it last night. It was a very good book, by the way. But I love what really resonated with me, and we can really relate to this because we talk about this a lot inside the organization. Is we should treat organizational issues in the same way we treat production issues. Everyone's all hands on deck when you have a P0 or a P1, and they're trying to figure out where the issue is and kind of rectify it. But we tend to almost turn a blind eye because people issues are kind of stickier and you're more involved, but we should treat people related and organizational issues with the same level of urgency. And I think that's a kind of great way to look at it, at least for IT organizations.
So I am going to keep an eye on the clock here, but Sylvia, you brought up your SaaS dashboard, and you and I have had some very interesting conversations about SaaS implementation and management. And in fact, for me to be perfectly transparent with everybody, Sylvie coined a term called SaaS at scale, which I've plagiarized every opportunity I've had in writing and speaking. And it obviously refers to, especially in cloud native companies like Dropbox and Slack, where there are hundreds literally of SaaS applications and services that are being used to support the business. And I mean, this is pretty well-trod ground. So everybody knows that the three main issues that you have when you go to scale are with the administration of all the tools, managing the users in and out and privileges and entitlements and all those kinds of things, the security issues, and then the cost issues. There's lots of money being spent in little amounts all across the entire organization. So Sylvia, I know you've thought deeply about this. So with those kind of three areas of friction or concern, has the COVID 5-month experience, made any of those better or worse? I mean, did some of them suddenly get a lot worse just because everybody moved to home?
Not really, because
Okay.
the SaaS solutions that we do implement go through a rigorous process to ensure they're private, they're secure, and they can do the work we want them to do. But what has changed? It's not those three pillars. We're still focused on streamlining that, and like talking to the point that Stephen said, like you want to free up people to do other work, things that are more challenging and fun and have a higher impact to the business. We're trying to get the administration level of work lowered by implementing a bunch of tools and capabilities. But the fourth leg of the chair has to be around engagement and productivity. So we're heavily focusing now on making sure our SaaS is being used the way it should be. So we're looking for user engagement with it, understanding how they act with one tool and then they navigate to another tool, and see how we can actually bridge those. And maybe there's an automation or an integration capability, but we're focused on user engagement and user value out of our SaaS. So we will for sure find some tools that are not being used effectively, nor do we want to invest further into them. So maybe we just like get rid of it. But mostly we're trying to streamline that experience for people when they navigate between systems and tools. A little bit like Dropbox has done for communication and collaboration and content creation, where it's a central place to work. You interact with your content, you're launching a Slack channel within Dropbox, you're able to start a meeting with Zoom and Dropbox, and it all lives in one place. So from a user experience perspective, you're in the place you want to be, and you're not like distracted by shifting between systems.
So, a lot of times in SaaS tools, there's a shared responsibility model. So IT does certain things, and then the business or the ops teams do certain things. Yep. Did that kind of shared responsibility model, again, get more difficult to maintain or ambiguous, or did it work effectively once everybody went home?
Yeah, well, luckily we had created a new governance framework before all this started. And we do have a framework that says this must be IT managed, this might be IT lightly managed, and this can be business managed. So we do own the process for any software coming into the company. So we have an anchor on that. So if somebody tries to avoid that, but we can streamline it based on what kind of capability it exists. But ultimately, IT manages anything that has a very critical, like mission critical aspect of the company. It's got sensitive data, has heavy integrations, goes cross department. IT manages those. But little other tools that are more siloed and niche, right, for those organizations, we are happy to have the business manage them, and we give them some guidelines and baselines for how to do that. So there's tools like, Airtable or Textio or Sprinkler or Airbnb Business or Rockbot, right? IT doesn't need to manage those things.
Steve, what about you? I mean, you're obviously a big SaaS organization as well. Have things gotten harder, easier? Did anything sort of pop up as difficult to manage through the transition?
Yeah, I mean, and it's true to say that we've seen a massive explosion in SaaS in the last decade or more, really. And we always talk about the fact that the average large enterprise, and this is really what we see, uses over 1,000 pieces of software to run their business today, which is like staggering when you think about that. And at Slack, we have around 250 SaaS providers that we use to run our business. So the focus is always, for us at least, and much similar to what Sylvie said, is how do you actually make sense of that level of complexity? How do you build a set of business processes and an architecture that will scale your company? And probably most importantly, how do you build an overall user experience that makes sense for your users with that much software? I mean, how can people find things that they need with 1,000 pieces of software in the enterprise? The mind boggles. And so in the context of COVID, more specifically to kind of answer your question, Mark, we saw a slight uptick, I would say, in software requests, mainly, interestingly enough, in the collaboration content space. Probably no big surprise. So people are going out and swiping their credit card to try out new software like virtual whiteboard solutions, and before we know it, we've got like 3 or 4 of them floating around the organization. And we actually got ahead of most of that I would say, much the same as Sylvie mentioned with our governance process. We have a software request channel that we created probably about 18 months ago inside of Slack. So people will drop in there and fill out, the value case for the software that they're interested in, and IT and security and finance and procurement. So the whole crew's in there to have eyes on these new requests as they come through. And if they circumvent the process, we'll catch them on the back end in procurement or our expense systems. So, and that ultimately just slows down the process. So they've become pretty good about kind of agreeing to and kind of adhering to that and keeping us all in the loop in that way. And ultimately, our main goal is to ensure that it fits with the architecture and we have an eye on the user experience. And to that end, it's really important that it integrates with Slack, because we see Slack, obviously, from our perspective, as that kind of system of engagement so that they get the best experience. They don't have to leave Slack to, approve, PTO requests and Workday or submit expense reports or do all those types of things. It all kind of comes to them in the same experience that they're used to. So I don't think there was any major new tensions, but a slight uptick, especially in the collaboration space, I would say.
Yeah.
One interesting observation. I've written extensively about this context switching that happens all the time. That we just talked about with all the different tools. Mm-hmm. And probably what I undervalued was the level of distractions that come through social intercourse in the office place. So the bigger, and I think that's come home to, it couldn't be more apparent than in the current situation, right? I mean, the amount of frittered away minutes that turn into hours and I'm not saying it's without value, but although we've all bemoaned this context switching that IT creates, the context switching that social interaction engenders, like it's orders of magnitude, I think, bigger than this phenomenon. So
yeah. No, there's no question about that. And again, I've talked about 1,500 Slack channels before. So you have to become really good about, in the same way that we had challenges with email in the past with like thousands of emails coming in on a basis. Now we've got kind of this much richer experience. So how do you actually, sort out the signal from the noise? You have to get really kind of good at doing that and kind of prioritizing and starting the right channels and things of that nature. And then there's the whole social aspect, like the cats and the dogs channels and all of that. So yeah, you just have to set your filters up right and focus on what's important.
But there are people that crave it, right? And really
no doubt.
Too, and bumping into somebody and having a casual chat, like when you're not rushing from conference room to conference room, right? And in the office. But we have a hack week that we do every year where the whole company hacks, and creates a lot of innovative like solutions that go in product or business processes. And one of them that came out of my team is called the coffee roulette. And we get matched to anybody that is signed up. And then we have like a 30-minute coffee in the morning and you get to meet somebody that you probably don't even know. So I found that like it's a planned interruption. How about that?
Yeah, that's right.
I like that.
That's right.
Now I want to save some time for questions from our audience. So I wanted to kind of end with one other topic, which I think is probably a concern to just about everybody that's listening. As IT leaders, like one of the obsessive concerns of almost everybody in IT is career development. And they're constantly seeking some coaching and guidance and advice about how to manage their careers. And under these kind of strange circumstances, I think a lot of people would ask themselves, how can I continue my career development? Or am I just supposed to keep my nose to the grindstone, do what I'm told to do? And I just need to put those kind of concerns on the back burner for the time being, and we'll get back around to that when things return to quote unquote normal. But career development is a secondary concern, and even if it's something I wanted to pursue, I'm not sure I'm feeling comfortable about talking to other leaders in the organization or my boss, because it almost sounds like I'm not thinking about the crisis first, and I'm thinking about myself. So, what words of wisdom or advice, maybe Sylvie, I'll start with you, or coaching would you give to somebody about how to think about career development over the next 12 months?
Yeah, we have a lot of emphasis around our individuals' personal growth plans. And we have 3 pillars about education, experience, and exposure. And as part of this, like working from home, we're at least I am emphasizing on the experience and exposure, piece. So we've doubled down in how people are thinking about their development and growth plans, and giving them those opportunities to be seen, to be heard, and have an impact that they may not have been if we haven't purposely set those goals for them, or those opportunities. The other thing that I feel is actually helpful is, we talked about this earlier, like Zoom meetings, Zoom everything has leveled the playing field. So you're now the other person on video, whereas like before it was the office and the conference room, nobody ever had a chance to speak up and share their wisdom. I think now people are able to contribute, be seen, be heard, and have an impact in ways that they didn't before. Like the game changer for introverts, like this is huge.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, like this feeling connected with people, right? Since we're working from home, we've significantly added more town halls and all hands, and understanding where we are with our goals and initiatives, like asking for feedback, getting people to share their ideas. So I feel that you need to double down on that experience and exposure and that transparency and huge amounts of communication.
Yeah, I know. I would, big +1 on that for sure. And it's interesting, and we talk about a lot of this in our kind of leadership meetings within the IT organization at Slack as well. I mean, clearly the biggest way that we can make a sustainable impact is by investing in our people. And oftentimes under the pressures of the day, that can get lost because we're trying to, just get the next thing done on the list and, try and do whatever it takes to deliver value to the business at the end of the day. But from a sustainable perspective, the biggest impact that we can have is through our people. And so to me, it's more important than ever. And just echoing what Sylvie said, to as individuals, make that a priority. This is as they say, the popular phrases, this is the new norm. It's going to be with us for quite some time. When we do at some point reintroduce an office again, it's likely going to be different than it was before. We're going to be optimizing our processes to remote first, which will include, things like career development, our talent processes, and those types of things. So don't shy away from the conversation. I mean, as managers and leaders, we can't shy away from the conversation again if we're going to sustain and make an impact overall. But as individuals, don't shy away from the conversation. Don't sidestep the fact that your career development is really important. It's more important now than it's ever been. So make it a topic. Make it a topic of conversation.
Even externally, right, Mark? I mean, we were talking earlier about how COVID has created these networks and connections of CIOs. Like Stephen brought some up. Like there's a lot of networks out there that have spun up, and people are learning from each other. So if you think about IT leaders and decision makers, like being part of those trade groups, being engaged, you will learn as much as you can share to others and learn. And that also gives you visibility to others for opportunities, but also you can learn and bring back to your company, as well as being engaged with VCs and startups. Like there's so much out there that I think COVID and this like virtual world is giving us so much more access to.
Yeah, you can be in like 6 different countries in one day. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah.
So I've got one more thought to add. I'm glad to see Christine come out here to keep us honest. I'm interested if you agree with this statement. I actually think the level of risk aversion in most organizations is probably lower right now. So what I mean by that is, if you come up with a better idea or some new way of doing something, there's enough instability that the crisis has engendered that I think probably the bias is towards action. Like, let's go give that a try. Sure, let's open up a Slack channel to handle, XYZ or whatever. Let me find some new way of delivering application enhancements or provisioning equipment, or I've got a predictive analytic, little side project I want to go off and give a try. Can I carve out 2 hours a week to go play with something like that? I just think under the current circumstances, there's a lot less stability, a lot less procedural, the way we have always done things around here. And so I think, people that are concerned about career development need to in part challenge themselves, and maybe leverage this opportunity to bring some new ideas out of the closet.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that, Christine, what have you got for us?
All right, so we're going to begin with a question for Sylvie that comes from Pete, and he asks, are there any new use cases surfaced which leverages Dropbox to increase employee efficiencies?
Well, I don't know everything that our customers are doing. I can't say I know that, but I think what's really new and innovative is our new Dropbox workspace, which is like this whole new way of working where you can have your best of breed tools live within Dropbox and eliminate the noise that you get from these interruptions and context switching. So we're surfacing information to you when you need it the most without like creating so much distraction. So I think the use cases of the future are about best of breed, and it's all about how you create that experience for people to focus and have greater flow. So minimizing those disruptions. And I think you'll see a lot more of that coming out from the new Dropbox.
Awesome. Stephen, this next one is for you. Teresa said, awesome discussion. What do you see as the most effective way to wrangle or curate the data to analyze and steer decision makings?
Gosh, that's a huge question that keeps me awake at night, literally on a daily basis. The most effective way to analyze and curate the data. I mean, for us, gosh, partly it's discipline, quite honestly, because we've grown and evolved, and you know, it's typical of high growth companies, tech companies especially. We've grown our technology stack. We talked about the fact that we have 250 SaaS tools to run our business, and it's really grown organically over the course of time. And so if you think about that, our processes and systems generate this kind of massive amount of data. I talked about the mountain of big data. And again, that's kind of disorganized, organic kind of data sets out there. And so you know, really the best way to kind of organize that is to get in there and build a data architecture and a data foundation. For all intents and purposes, that's what we're doing right now. More specifically, we've just rolled out Snowflake. We're using Matillion as our ETL or ELT tool, depending on which acronym you prefer to use. And we're using Looker on the front end of that. And again, to me, it's, you know, how do we take this really unorganized, unstructured data set and organize it into a way that's going to meet that business need. And it's a lot of kind of heavy lifting around core data architecture.
I gotta agree with Stephen. Everything you said. We rolled out Snowflake 3 years ago, and we've seen a hockey stick, right, in terms of adoption. And to add that, you have more people using it, more people mining your data, the more insights you get out of it.
Right. Exactly.
All right, I am combining two questions about what technologies you guys are using. One's from Ravindra. He says, you missed whiteboarding being virtual. What tools have you used for this capability? And Emily asked, what are your favorite tools to help support your internal employees when they have technical issues? So I will let you both answer those questions. So one, whiteboarding, and the other, internal employees for support.
Yep. Do you want me to go, Steve, or you want to take a step?
Go ahead.
So maybe Stephen is further along, but we're evaluating 2 different whiteboarding solutions, right, and many others, but there's 2 that are coming up as like industry leaders already, and that's Miro and Mural. And, you know, we haven't made a choice or decision. We're definitely going to look at others as well. And then in terms of the tools for tech support and supporting the users, we're replacing an existing solution and rolling out ServiceNow, and everybody here probably knows ServiceNow, but we're rolling it out as a user experience platform, not an IT solution. So that will also generate like a lot of engagement and self-service and automation as part of the platform, and eliminate the silos that have been created across the company for service functions like either in HR or finance or legal. Right? Who can remember all the aliases? So we're kind of like reducing that into a single place. A help me out.
Yeah. And for us as well, it's interesting. We should compare notes, Sylvia. You know, the more that we chat, the more I realize we haven't chatted in a while. So we should get together. Note to self. But yeah, Mural as well is one of the ones that seems to be growing in popularity. And we're also going to be looking at more of as kind of an evaluation of virtual whiteboard solutions as well, even though they're kind of already organically being used. From a support standpoint, we've actually, interestingly enough, automated, I've touched on this before, much of our IT support through an intelligent chatbot inside of Slack. It's called AskBot that we created. We're using Jira Service Desk on the back end. And we actually use a company called MoveWorks, kind of in the middle of that. And what we found is something like 80% of our IT requests that come into our support desk are repeatable in nature. I mean, they're things like I've forgotten my password, I need provisioned, smart sheets or some other type of software. So they're very repeatable. And so we're able to actually use this kind of AI-powered machine learning chatbot to take the request, effectively service it, open a ticket if it needs to in our service desk, and automatically provision the software, or reset passwords, or do those types of things. So again, it's been a huge win for us, just in terms of freeing up our people to focus on the kind of higher order, higher value work from an IT support standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We've also used bots in Slack, like talking about bring the work to the place where people are. So it's like where people don't have to go to a place to do the thing. So we're looking at those experiences that are most meaningful. And engineers like to live in Slack as an example. So it's easy.
I want to jump on this one too for a second. And Stephen, you'll enjoy this. So I've talked to several people who have told me that they're probably going to discontinue their walk-up service desks when they go back to the office because the work's moved over to Slack, even if they have a ServiceNow backend. So the request or the issues being surfaced in Slack, it gets converted into a ServiceNow ticket. It gets managed in the background by IT, but to the user, it's just a kind of a Slack conversation that's going on.
Which is a wonderful thing, music to my ears. And one of the things we found as well is it's kind of like the wisdom of crowds. So we actually have a channel in Slack that's our IT support channel, and people are posting like questions in there, and we find that like non-IT people from like marketing or engineering or somewhere else are helping them out. so and first of all, you're going, well, it's nice that people are monitoring the IT support channel on our behalf, and maybe they should be working on their real work, but it helps us out. So, but it's this kind of wisdom of crowds. If people know the answer, then they're happy to post the Wi-Fi password or whatever the case is.
Yeah. So you get a kick out of this. In a prior life, we had a chat group for work from home people,
right?
And to your point, they were largely self-supporting. So I would go in and I would read this. And so somebody raised some kind of a question. And one of the early responses was, the first thing to do not contact IT. They were doing the wrong thing to do. Here's what you need to do. Number one, do not ask IT.
Oh my goodness. That's funny.
So did I cut you off? I didn't mean to.
No, more of the same. I agree. The virtual, we have a drop. Our desktop support's called DropStop, and we're building out our virtual DropStop, and we want to have that interaction because that's what Dropboxers want. They want that human interaction. They don't want to just send it to the bot. So we're going to have multiple channels based on the preferences of people.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
Is that a quick follow-up question to employee support? What about supporting employees around the globe as far as procuring, shipping, an employee sending a ticket to IT saying that his or her laptop is dead and not having a backup method is now a mission, and we can't give everyone a backup laptop? That's from Gordon.
Well, we have like equipment across our major offices, so it's easy to get things turned around within the same day, right? So, and then the other thing we have is a backup in the event. Like in the event you can't get it, something's wrong, whatever, there's an inventory issue, which we haven't had. We also have a virtual desktop infrastructure that can Band-Aid in the interim. So we've got some backups, but that has never been a problem.
Yeah, I'm spookily enough, exactly the same. We've inventory. We've actually beefed up our inventory, and we're also doing virtual desktop. And specifically, we've introduced virtual desktop because mainly the situation we had in India, like a couple of months ago, where India shut down, and you couldn't actually get laptops to new employees and people who needed them. So conceivably, who knows what's going to happen in the future with spikes in different parts of the world of the pandemic. So we're kind of following the same process, which is beefing up inventory in various different locations and also using the virtual desktop.
All right, awesome. So I do want to say we are at time. It's 1, so the 2 new sessions are starting: building trust with stakeholders when you can't meet face-to-face, and CS leaders on using BT to reduce churn and increase upsells. I'm gonna let us go for one more question. People who want to go to the other sessions, feel free to drop off. If you want to stay, you can stay. But I am interested to hear, someone asked, Sylvie, how has your IT operations team priorities shifted in the wake of COVID?
We talked about this a little bit earlier. For the majority, our initiatives did not shift because they were very tightly coupled to the business strategies. And our business strategies, have been very strong. So they're not shifting all around either. I think the biggest part, as I mentioned, we paused a few areas like office build outs and so on, and focused on internal efficiencies and employee experiences. So I think that's an amazing opportunity for all of our IT organizations to really understand experiences first before you start rolling out technology.
And then Stephen, this is to both of you, but Stephen, you can go first. As leaders, how do you manage the balance between reduced workforce in IT? And this person said she had a few rounds of layoffs, and the increased need of automation from business teams as they have fewer people. And this is from Anjali.
Yeah, and it's a hard one, and it comes back to it's not necessarily an easy answer, but it comes back to setting expectations. I mean, it's interesting. I've never been in an IT job, whether it's as an individual contributor or as a leader of a function, where there has been I haven't been overwhelmed by demand, right? There's always more demand from the business than there is capacity to fulfill. And as that demand kind of, as there's pressure on the capacity that you have, becomes even more difficult. There's no question about that. So all you can do is be really good about setting expectations and making sure that you're very clear about what can be done and what cannot be done. Given the financial situation or otherwise that an organization may be in.
Want to comment on that too?
Yeah, it's not. There's no magic wand for this one. In addition to, I agree with Stephen shared. The other thing we've done into our team, we've laid out a percentage of our team that's working on KTLO versus projects, and we also added a little bucket called small enhancements. And we found that a lot of our business partners have little things they want, little things that they need to get done. And our developers and engineers in between, like projects, not necessarily they're in between, but when they're on a project and there's a dependency on somebody else to get something done to finish their work, they go pull from this like Kanban list of small enhancements. And the delight that brings to people is outstanding. It's not that project that took 6-12 months, but it's that like, I got this little enhancement, it changed the work that I do every day. And we feel that that's created a great balance.
So I want to pick up on Stephen's comment about expectation setting. We talked earlier about career development. So if you haven't developed this skill already, you have an opportunity over maybe the next several months to learn how to say no, right? As an IT professional, you need to do it politely, rationally, in a business context. There's many ways to say no. There's many reasons to say no, but you will never be able to keep everybody happy.
Right.
And people will only remember like the big hits. You could do 100 little things well, but if you do one big thing, visibly well, that can pay dividends, that the other 100 things just will never deliver. So you've really got to apply the effort in places that are going to have the biggest impact. You can't escape all your responsibilities, but you have to be able to say no.
Yeah, exactly. I have an expression like you got a cup and you fill it with your big rocks first, and then there's room for pebbles, and there's rarely room for a little sand, right? So like there's a lot of people that feel reward with a lot of incremental, a numerous number of small things, but when you look back, it's hard to see what impact you've had. So I truly believe that the big rocks first.
Yeah.
Like a fun team activity, you can have everyone make a little cup of. Okay, this is a little bit of along the same line. So Gary asks, are you seeing long-term plans to continue to use a remote workforce? How is that impacting where your employees are recruited from? Are you moving to rural areas, offshore? And how does that bode for your existing local workforce?
Yeah, for us, we're really opening it up, and it's changing how we think about recruiting. For all intents and purposes, we've moved pretty much the vast majority of our open positions to remote, or in a major hub location that we have, like San Francisco or Denver. And the beauty of that is it's really started to allow us to tap into locations in the US and globally that before we really wouldn't have looked at, because we're very centric around certain hubs around the world. That said, we're also going to be accelerating our build out in Pune in India. We acquired a company a couple of years ago, and that was based in Pune, and that's become our major kind of offshore site. So we're going to be investing much more there as well. But in the future, I envision a world we have 3% of the workforce prior to this at Slack were working remotely, even though we provide the technology that allows people to work from anywhere. 3% of our population was working remotely. We've gone to 100%. I think we're going to settle somewhere in between, where we'll have maybe 30 to 40% ultimately in a few years' time of our workforce fully remote, and then the rest will be kind of hybrid. In other words, they may come into the office a couple of days a week, and they may choose to work from home the rest of the time.
Very similar. We're in a work from home till the rest of the year, but the future for us is very hybrid. Some full-time remotes, and most people part-time in the office and working from home. So, that's going to be a change that I think is going to have long-lasting impacts.
Awesome. All right, I want to wrap it up. Mark, do you have any closing?
No, thanks to everybody for hanging in there with us, and special thanks to Sylvie and Stephen for taking the time. I've thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. We could keep going for another hour.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a pleasure. It's great to see you guys.
Really appreciate it.
I want to throw in there a lot of people, a lot of awesome discussion, taking what you guys were saying, responding with their own tech stacks, their own experience. We saw a lot of people really loving the Ruth Bader Ginsburg bot. So thank you so much, guys. Awesome discussion.
All right. Thanks very much then. Cheers.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.